the use of the phrase argy-bargy. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the morning meeting. I'm Mark Halperin. Sean, Dan, and I are going to walk you through the day, then kick it around a bit, and then take your argy-bargy questions. Please raise your electronic hand if you're here on the two-way platform. And if you're watching on the X or YouTube, welcome in. Here's what I determined over the weekend. Some of you people who do not like Donald Trump are reluctant to speak on the platform because when you do, you get attacked in the chat. That's unfortunate. Shouldn't happen. Please don't attack people in the chat. But I say to people on the left, come on in anyway. Just to be like me, disregard the chat. Don't worry about their senseless attacks. Better to participate here. Get in the arena, get on the stage, get in the National Town Square and have it out. And bonus opportunity to talk to Sean and Dan. Gentlemen, is Trump failing? Yes or no?
Oh, we're
Sean,
going there already, huh?
no.
Okay.
Just yes or no before I run through the data.
Absolutely not.
All right, Sean says not. Dan?
Not.
Not. All right, two nots. We'll talk more about that. Here's the day book for the day. President Trump. Lots going on regarding Ukraine. Of course, today's the third anniversary of, I'm not afraid to say it, Putin's aggressive invasion of Ukraine. Unlike some Republicans, I'm not afraid to say that Putin invaded Ukraine, and it was wrong. He shouldn't have done it. Trudeau and some European leaders are in Kyiv today, commemorating and showing solidarity with President Zelenskyy. President Trump is at this hour, perhaps it's already over. There was a private conversation that he was doing with the G7 leaders to talk about Ukraine and NATO and other issues. 12:15, President Trump greets President Macron, and then they have a press conference at 2 o'clock after some bilateral meetings. Don't know what JD Vance is doing. Capitol Hill, lots going on regarding Ukraine, including the Ukraine caucus of the House having a press conference at 5. At 4 o'clock, House Rules Committee is supposed to vote on the reconciliation resolution. We'll see if that passes. All right, let's start with Ukraine. Sean, I watched some of the Sunday shows. I normally don't, but I was at the gym, so I did, flipping around. And Senator Mark Wayne Mullen, who 3 years ago staunchly condemned Putin's invasion, joined many Trump administration officials in refusing to say that Putin invaded Ukraine and the war is his fault. Some have said President Trump won't say it because he's mad at Zelenskyy, but why is it that Mark Wayne Mullen and other Republicans will not say, for the historical record, that Putin invaded Ukraine?
I can't say that I speak for everyone. I mean, I know you, Congressman Lawler was on some shows or on ABC this week. He said it. So I wouldn't say that it's a universal Republican thing. I'm going to guess that someone like Mark Wayne Mullen, who's very close to President Trump, just doesn't want to get in the way of that negotiation, because all that's going to happen is comments like that will be used by the left-wing media to sort of try to create space between the two. And right now, I think a lot of them have recognized that Trump's in the middle of trying to put an end to this war. And the last thing they need to do is do something that'll drive a wedge between his supporters and himself. That would be my guess.
But let me just stay with you for a minute. What does it matter if that wedge is driven? Like, for whatever reason.
Well, first of all, I agree with you, because my guess is that in the last 4 years, Mark Wayne Mullen's been asked that question and answered it. And so I'm going to guess that there's a enterprising young journalist who will be given something from the DNC today and claiming that it's a scoop and then put it out there. But I don't, to me, this is not one of those things where I find it divisive. I mean, it happened on Joe Biden's watch. In fact, so I would actually point to it and say, yeah, Russia invaded them. Reason they did it is because of his feckless leadership, the Afghanistan withdrawal, and I would pin it on Biden. So I don't know. I find it kind of intriguing myself, because this to me isn't a Trump issue. Biden, it was under Biden's watch. It was under his lackless leadership that it occurred. So I would put it on Biden's lap, and without a problem. So to be honest with you, I can't answer that question. I don't agree that it's universal, though. I think you're seeing plenty.
I didn't say it was universal. I just said lots of them won't, including members of the cabinet, including the.
Well, the cabinet's understandable, right? I mean, because you got to make sure that you're not. I mean, he's your boss, and you're not doing. Rubio, I think, handled it really well when asked, because he described some issues, and I think you touched on this. But like Zelenskyy has done very little good helping that relationship. And the other day when he came out talking about that they can't find half of the funding, like it's just he's made a horrible mess of this situation.
Dan, what's going on here?
The same reason they can't say Joe Biden won in 2020. I mean, it's the kind of
different.
It's not. It's the alternative facts of whatever suits the narrative. And I think in this instance, Trump wants a deal. Trump knows that the best way to get the deal is kind of pounding Zelenskyy and making him cave, because it's much harder to get Russia to cave. They're much more strategic. They're much more canny. And so if you say Russia invaded Ukraine, Russia started the war, Russia is responsible for the war, then your natural instinct is to say, okay, we have to prevent this from happening again. What are they kind of giving as part of the deal? And he doesn't want to have that conversation. So instead, you just kind of say, hey, we're not going to talk about who started this or how we got here. We just want a deal. And so I think it's just creating an alternate kind of reality to suit the needs of the end game he wants.
I agree with you. Either of you want to say anything else about Ukraine? Any other points you want to make?
I mean, I thought it was fascinating that on Friday night and Saturday, the administration kind of tried to almost create momentum to a deal by saying, oh, we're really close on the minerals. Like, we're going to get there. This is going to happen. And it really appears that that Zelenskyy is willing to do it if the U.S. is willing to put in writing security guarantees. This goes back to the other day when I said to you, Mark, if Trump would just say it, I'd feel a lot better. It appears that the U.S. does not want to put anything in writing. We do not want to make any guarantees. So that's an interesting thing, right? Because then if you're Zelenskyy, why are you signing this over?
Sean.
I do think, I mean, first of all, on the rare earth minerals, I got to tell you, as an American taxpayer, we tried to do this a little in Iraq and never actually fully executed on it. But the idea that we're actually getting something out of this, I know there's always this discussion about direct assistance versus loans, what have you. But, for us, I actually think that having a president that's saying we get something back and we're not just giving up is actually a welcome, a breath of fresh air.
Can I ask a question of ignorance? You'll both tell me I'm stupid. I read a lot about Ukraine, talk to a lot of people about it. It seems like if these rare earth minerals are so valuable, why didn't any of the following come up? Why wasn't Ukraine a rich country? Why didn't, before the war, why didn't we worry that Putin would seize the minerals? And why is it just now coming up as a form of repayment? I've never heard of this.
I would say good questions. I think that's part of it, in terms of why we didn't before. I think it's, because 4 years of Biden, I don't think you're going to ever hear that. But I also think...
Okay, but go to the first question. If these things are so valuable, why weren't the Ukrainians...
I think that might go to why Putin was trying to take over Ukraine, get it back.
Well, but I didn't hear anything about that. I didn't hear when he invaded.
I think it's because Trump wants... Look, he has always said this, right? But he's always been a big part of, if we do something for you, what... I
understand. But if the minerals are...
Why didn't we hear about it?
If the minerals are real...
What I was going to say is they're not. There isn't a huge deposit of, it's not a real thing.
That could be.
If it wasn't a real thing, then
somebody should be exposing that now. If it's not a real thing, somebody should be saying, "Why are we fighting with Ukraine about something that's bullshit?" And why is Zelenskyy, if they're not real, why is Zelenskyy resisting? He should just give them over.
Look, they're real in that there are minerals there. It is going to be part of their tax base going forward, and so they don't have much of an industrial base right now that's left in there's farming and agriculture. But I think from his standpoint, it's like, look, we are going to have to rebuild our country. So we need some form of revenue to just like the Germans did, the Japanese did, the Europeans do. So, I mean, it's not that it's nothing, but it's not the end all be all that we're making it out to be. I just think Trump wants something to say to the American people. I got something for us.
Hey, Mark, I'm gonna flip this on you. I want you to answer this as from a journalist standpoint. There was a big thing on ABC's This Week yesterday where Martha Raddatz, as she, almost inflexibly has to do, defends the Democrats and goes after the Republicans, where she said Trump falsely claims that Zelensky's a dictator. So I actually went down the rabbit hole and I started to look down definition and who gets classified and what. And you can expand a definition and obviously you can use it in a hyperbolic way. But if Zelensky canceled elections in Ukraine and refused to stand for re-election, Russia has elections. You can, but here's my question. Where's the line between a guy who has elections that we know are 100% rigged, who kills his opponents, and Zelensky who cancels them?
But here's the thing, Sean. If he wants to call Zelensky a dictator, he's got to call Putin a dictator.
No. I'm not. That's not what I'm asking you.
I know it's not what you're asking, but I'm answering your question. Where's the line? The line is they're both. Neither of them is Thomas Jefferson. They both have real problems in how they've governed. Both have to deal with corruption, etc. But you cannot, if you're trying to be fair and set a good example for children, you cannot call Zelensky a dictator and then refuse.
No, and I don't. I'm not disputing that. I was intrigued by where that line, because there's obvious dictators, right? There's Kim Jong-un, people who literally don't face opposition. And then there's ones who fake it, which is what Russia is, because they're not real elections.
So Zelensky has, under the laws of the state of the country, Zelensky has the right to not hold elections during the war.
And that has, by the way, been common throughout the world, that during wars, people suspend laws.
Yeah.
We did it in our own country in the Civil War.
And it's a pretty tough war. It's not like it's right.
No, I'm not. I was just, like I said, for me, I just thought it's an interesting line of, and I'm with you. I'm not trying to make the equivalence to Russia by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
But I just sort of thought to myself, like, there's unequivocal. Anyway, we can end there. But
I don't think he's a dictator, but he's got some problems that the U.S. government and the U.S. press have glossed over. All right. If you read Heather Cox Richardson, the Rachel Maddow of Substack, if you watch James Carville's remarks over the weekend, if you read the dominant media, Dan, you will see lots of things, lots of strands you can pull together to say Trump is basically doomed. Carville says within 30 days, the administration will be dead. They do have lots of challenges coming up on debt and deficit and government shutdown, et cetera. So I know you said at the top the wheels are not off, but what would you say in all the things that Carville and Richardson are seizing on? What are currently the biggest threats to Trump?
Yeah, look, I as I said earlier, I don't think Trump is falling apart. I don't think he was as strong as people thought he was, 2 weeks ago either. And that is because the laws of political physics are beginning to take hold, which is to say a lot of what Trump did when he got out of the box was the performative side, right? He loves to win the headline every single day. And for those first, 20 days or so, it was immigration raids, the videos of it. It was DOGE, putting out statistics. Well, now what we're seeing is one on immigration, they've stopped putting stuff out. They're frustrated. Friday night, for those who didn't see it, they got rid of the head of ICE because they're frustrated. And with DOGE, a lot of the stuff they're putting out is simply not true. So they'll say we found 5 million in savings. I'm going to use this as a for instance. Musk will then say it was 500 million, and Trump will say it's 5 billion. Of even Trump appointees wrong, but he's not as strong as people I think thought he was 20 days ago.
Sean, let me show you a couple things. First, lots of debate, as Dan suggested, about whether Musk is having his power challenged. Look at this, 102, please. This is something Musk tweeted this morning. Even after several heads of departments, including some very Trumpy, some very MAGA ones, said, no, thanks, our employees are not going to be listing 5 things they did last week. Musk tweets this morning that starting this week, if you fail to return to the office, you'll be placed on administrative leave after being told a month ago to come back. And then here is one of the great leaders of the Democratic Party speaking last night at
and not judge, but listen from our hearts and welcome them into our tent, because we are going to need a big tent to resist successfully what's coming at us. We must not isolate. We must find ways to project an inspiring vision of the future, one that is beckoning, welcoming, that will help people believe that, to quote the novelist Pearl Cleage, on the other side of the conflagration, there will still be love, there will still be beauty, and there will be an ocean of truth for us to swim in. Let's make it so.
Sean, on a scale of 0 to 10, with 10 being 0 being no fear at all and 10 being abject fear, how afraid are you of Jane Fonda?
Oh, Hanoi Jane, you freak me out. I hope that they embrace that. Another Hollywood lefty that's embarrassed our country. I hope that that's the messenger of the Democratic Party going forward, because you'll make it easy for us. So it just blows my mind how Hollywood continues to miss the message of the American people and its priorities. But as a Republican who wants to grow our party and our movement, I would love to put some money behind that and just have people listen to Jane Fonda over and over again.
All right, leaving Jane Fonda aside, how about Abigail Spanberger? How about Chris Murphy? How about James Carville, Heather Cox Richardson? Are they making any points that you say, yeah, you're right?
No, look, I think there's a couple of things.
There's some potholes here.
So from a Democratic Party standpoint, I think that they need to do something to get their folks rallied up, right? Dan's touched on this a little, and so maybe this is what gets them, their Occupy Wall Street moment here. But at the end of the day, what motivates them? I was at CPAC, for a part of the weekend. I talked to President Trump last night after.
Go on.
Yeah, exactly. Just drop that in
this part, he's fired up. I was talking.
Who called whom?
Technically, he called me.
Was he calling you? But he's calling you back.
I left him a message.
Yeah. All right. So, well, what can you tell us about your conversation?
I don't discuss my conversations with him, but I will tell you that he was he is unbelievably enthusiastic about the direction he's going. He believes the savings were just at the tip of the iceberg and we can achieve a lot more. This was a guy, he was euphoric, excited, and I think he echoed the sentiment that I saw at CPAC, which is that people are fired up. The applause lines that he got when he talked about DOGE in particular were probably the biggest ones. To your point about that thing, I actually think there was a little tit for tat going on with Elon, right? So he put out a truth Friday, I think it was, that said, the only issue I have with Elon is we need to do more. So Elon, I think Elon trying to step it up. But look, all the morning shows doing this huge pushback that the cabinet officials are basically saying, hey, we got it. We don't need you to get in our lane, though. We'll make the decisions about. But
if Elon were all powerful, they wouldn't do that.
But he's not, and they know it. And their bottom line is, whether it's Kash Patel, it's not like Kash Patel and Elon are there's daylight between them. I think when Kash put out that thing about the FBI and others, it's not like they didn't get the message. They know what President Trump wants to do. They just want to be able to execute it in a way. So I get it. Elon's got to flex his muscles too and say, hey, Mr. President, I got the word. But
I think that's part of it, right? Which is, if you're doing layoffs in a company, let's say you're the CEO, you would say to your department heads, hey, I need whatever, 10%, right? Come back to me with 10%, whether it's budget or bodies. It's not. So for the last couple of weeks, Elon's been the king. This, that, DOGE is this, that. Now the department heads are kind of like, buddy, time out. We'll do it as you say.
Spot on, Dan.
Yeah. And I also just think the one thing, though, I agree with Sean, MAGA is fired up. I think the one thing that would concern me if I'm a Republican is I haven't seen a single one of these polls. I think now we're up to 6 that doesn't show independents running 10% net disapproval of a lot of this stuff. Correct. In the long run, that would concern me, because ultimately you need them to win in the midterms, right? And you need them to win.
But the midterms are over a year away. This obsession with the polls. This obsession with the polls, I get why people are tracking the decline, but they're meaningless until you have an election.
I think he's going to get rewarded for this. The bottom line is most Americans believe that the federal government is bloated and inefficient. The president's spending time in that and delivering on not just the cultural stuff, which is phenomenal, But I think the economic stuff where he's looking at waste and fraud and abuse and inefficiencies in the government, he'll deliver on tax cuts, the border. Again, you look at the story. I mean, there was a story I tweeted out this morning. These folks are now turning around and going back down to South America. They're not even trying to cross into the country.
Incredible story. On the other hand, Starbucks just laid off 1,100 people. All right.
I was just going to say the big.
Can I make that point, Mark?
Yeah.
I actually think that what's really interesting, and I truly do believe this. I know a lot of people, obviously, because of where I live, who work are tangential to the federal government. And I feel for somebody. I mean, regardless of whether you have kids or not, just as an individual, the idea of like losing your job and having to, in some cases, figure out I get it. Like, I feel bad. But why is it, what has kind of blown my mind is that 1,000, not that I have any love lost for Starbucks, for God's sakes, but when 1,000 people get laid off at Starbucks, no one's concerned. When 1,000 people get laid off at USAID, it's my God.
I'm concerned about both.
I'm just saying. We've seen over the years how many times have we had layoffs, major layoffs at major companies, and there's no sense of empathy or concern, writ large for those people. Now suddenly, because they're public employees,
I agree with you 100%, Sean.
All right. Real quick, and then I want to get to the last topic, and then bring folks in. If you want to get in the conversation, please raise your hand. All ideologies welcome. And if you've never raised your hand before, today's the day. So I was talking to people on the Hill over the weekend, this morning, communicating. Some people say Johnson's going to get the votes. They'll vote tomorrow night. It'll pass. Some people say no, it's going down. They'll pull the vote. These are smart, well-connected people. So my gut is, I'll tell you, I think it's going to pass because they're just going to say all the things you say. Presidency's on the line. This isn't the final vote. You'll get another crack at it. It's not perfect. Lots of people are swallowing stuff. Sean, is it going to pass tomorrow?
Interestingly, I think we're having similar conversation. I talked to a very senior member of the conference Saturday afternoon who expressed unbelievable confidence that it was going to pass.
Yeah.
I've never seen a budget vote passed with more than one. And this individual, I won't give away their gender, said, oh, no, I think we'll be fine. I don't think like I said, I spent 3 years at the budget committee. I've never seen a budget vote pass for more than one vote. And your arm twisting down the thing. There's too many people for too many different reasons. You've got the moderate sort of, Trump 1 to Biden plus 2 or 3 districts. And then you've got the hardliners like the Tim Burchetts who are like, no.
All right. Is it going to pass or not?
I think it doesn't go, they yank it once, they make some adjustment, and then they put it back on.
They can't afford that. Dan, if they yank it once, they're dead. Dan.
I agree with that. I think they do. I think it passes because in both parties, I have not in the last 20 years seen the moderates hold the line and get a pound of flesh. Moderates almost always cave because they're just not very strong.
Everybody's going to have to cave because failure is not an option. The presidency's on the line, blah, blah, blah. And the other talking point is,
I tell you, if President Trump is the key to this, as he usually is, but if he gets off the sidelines and puts the hammer down on some of these guys, it passes. If you're not hearing him make phone calls.
Yeah, he has to. It's his bill.
Well, I mean, look, I think that the issue for the moderates is you are going to vote for all these spending cuts and then go to conference, and this is going to get kind of undone or, tweaked. But you're going on the record for $850 million essentially in Medicaid cuts. And they know that is the ads will start by Saturday.
Of course.
Well, the funny thing is, I spent 2 years at the NRCC, the National Republican Congressional Committee, dealing with a lot, all the members that were getting reelected. And the one thing that the moderates were always the issue. It's a tough vote. And the bottom line is, as I said to them, and this isn't any huge revelation, I was like, dude, you think somehow you vote no on this, you're not going to get tagged with it? Like, give me a break. Yep. The attack's coming, whether or not you want to be a team player or not.
The other talking point they're going to use is to say, if we don't pass this, the Senate has the upper hands. Don't let the House of Lords win.
And by the way, because we talked about money, I believe the DCCC, the House Democratic arm, outraised the NRCC.
Yes.
For that,
should have been on my list. Should have been on my list of green shoots for the Democrats. All right. New York State, incredible place, a center of fashion, technology, media. What am I missing? The
Mark
arts.
Halperin.
I live here. There's so much in New York State and New York City. It is an embarrassment that our mayor is Mayor Adams and our governor is Governor Hochul. That is changing soon with election for mayor this year and election for governor next year. One of the people who thinking of running for mayor of New York City is Mike Lawler. I mean, for governor of New York State is Mike Lawler, a Republican who's appeared on Two-Way. Another Democrat, Richie Torres, also appeared on Two-Way and will be on Two-Way tonight, tomorrow evening. What do these two gentlemen have in common besides the fact that they're House members aspiring to run for governor of New York? They both had star turns in the media in the last news cycle. First, here is Congressman Lawler on some CNN show that's supposed to be funny. Typically, I don't believe it is, but this is funny. Roll tape.
Donald Trump lives by one song. It was a Beach Boys hit back in the day. Aruba, Jamaica, Panama, I'm gonna take you. Bermuda, Bahama, Greenland, come home to your mama. Key Largo, Toronto, Trudeau, why don't we go? Off the Mediterranean Sea, there's a place called Gaza-Lago. That's where we've gotta go to get some USAID.
Did you write that?
I did.
You did.
I'm supposed to prepare a song because, honey,
We can freestyle a song.
All right, that was Lawler. Now here is Richie Torres this morning on CNBC's fabled Squawk Box endorsing Andrew Cuomo, his ally, to be mayor of New York City, even though Cuomo hasn't even announced yet. Roll that.
Well, look, I mean, Andrew Cuomo is a common sense Democrat who represents.
That's an oxymoron.
Well, no, it's not, because most Democrats do have common sense. And for me, the two most important virtues in politics are competence and courage. And Andrew Cuomo has the competence to run New York City in a moment of crisis, and he has the courage to stand up to the extremes of American politics, whether it's the far right or the far left. You know, there's a mayoral candidate who openly identifies with the Democratic Socialist of America, which celebrated the mass murder of Jews on October 7th. And so when it comes to confronting political extremism in New York, when it comes to confronting the crisis of crime, we need not a nice guy, but a tough guy like Andrew Cuomo.
Is this an endorsement of Governor Cuomo or an indictment of Mayor Adams? Many people are able to have pretty solid comebacks in politics. The further we get removed from, I don't even remember. I remember some of what it was, but I also remember as a governor, he was pretty well thought of in terms of just being of operations, of being, you know, there's I think a little bit of nostalgia. Yeah. For how he was as a governor versus the current governor.
Dan, who will be the next elected mayor of New York City and the next elected governor of New York State?
Andrew Cuomo will be the next mayor, and I think it'll be a great race between Richie Torres and Mike Lawler for the next governor of New York. And I hope it's Richie Torres, and I wonder if Andrew would endorse Richie.
Oh,
in a New York minute. Sean, next mayor, next governor.
It sounds like I'm a little out of my wheelhouse on New York politics, but I will tell you, everything that I can pick up sounds like Cuomo is pretty much a shoo-in to be the next mayor. And I'm really high on Mike Lawler. I think that he's done really well in a swing district. He knows how to raise money. He knows how to work on the media. I mean, Lee Zeldin did an absolute job in paving the way to make this possible. And I think that Lawler could ride right in the path that he started to plow. And I feel, depending on the right environment, I think if there's a Republican that can win statewide right now, it's Mike Lawler.
All right, everybody who wants to get in on the conversation, please raise your hand. As I wait for a few more to go up, I'll do some housekeeping, as they say on the television and Kiwanis businesses. Number one, tonight, 6 p.m. Eastern time is Two-Way tonight. But at 5 p.m. tonight, don't forget, episode 2 of Meghan McCain's Happy Hour tonight. Meghan McCain, don't forget to join at 5 p.m. Eastern time. And then stay with us, 6 p.m. for Two-Way tonight. Then tomorrow morning we'll be back. And then tomorrow night, Richie Torres will be our guest on Two-Way tonight. I had one other housekeeping item. Oh, remember peace, love, and understanding. And remember the presumption of grace. And I'll ask you people from MAGAland, please don't attack anyone who talks on this platform who you don't agree with. Don't go into chat and attack them. It's not productive. It's not good for us. Listen to them, learn, don't attack them. Thank you for your service for America and for listening to what I'm saying, and please don't attack them. All right, here we go. Anthony M. in Paris, Texas, or maybe you're actually in France. Welcome in, sir. Thank you for joining. Tell folks where you are, what's on your mind, please.
Hello, guys.
Hello.
Hi, again.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Hear you fine.
Right. Okay. No. I came on just to talk about because my president is in your country.
Yeah. Are you in France? Are you in France, sir?
Yes, I am.
Where are you?
Yeah.
Where are you in France?
On the northwest of France.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, it's on the topic of whether Zelenskyy is a dictator, because I heard your conversation earlier. And my personal opinion is that he is, based on the fact that, not just the fact that he canceled the elections. And yes, I understand that it does happen during wartime. But I think for me, especially as a Christian, the more alarming thing that has happened was the fact that he just banned an entire group of Christians from actually practicing their faith. And I mean, if that was to happen in the US, I'm sure it would be an outcry and people would be complaining about the fact that he just did it unilaterally without anything. So for me, that is really alarming. And here in Europe, it's fascinating because if for the past since Trump made that comment, every single channel, whether it is in Germany, here in France, or in the UK, they all seem to suggest that you can never say that the guy is acting as a dictator, which I just don't understand. I mean, I understand the geopolitics of it, but at least if people were like, okay, we know that it's not above reproach, but we need it for X, Y, and Z. If you can make that case,
right,
I'll be okay with that.
Okay,
But
Anthony,
when
hold
a
on.
person
Hold on.
actually ban,
Okay,
yeah.
hold on, Anthony. Hold on. Let's let Dan respond. Dan.
Look, I'm not aware of what you just said, but I will give him slack in that his country was invaded, right? For 3 years, they have been fighting tooth and nail to remain a free country. Vladimir Putin rolled tanks in, launched missiles, like he is trying to take over their country. So suspending elections, I don't know why he is preventing religion from being able to people to practice it. But I will cut him slack. And when the war is over, that's when we will see, like, does he allow the elections to come back? Does he allow people to practice freely their religion? But I would just say the North Star to this conversation is he is trying to keep his country free from Russian occupation.
Yeah, I understand that. Again, he's been, there is an invasion of his country. I get that. But and that is a fact, really, especially with the Russian Orthodox Church. And also remember that just prior in 2014, people who are ethnic Russian in the East were not able to have some books written in the language too. So the language element, which is cultural element, here in France, for example, I cannot imagine. I live, as I say, in Brittany here. If the central French government was to ban the language, the local language here, even if there's only a small number of people actually can speak the language, but if the central government was to ban that, there will be outcry. Why aren't
Okay,
people
hold on.
actually saying?
Hold on. Let Sean. Thank you, Sean. Go ahead.
So what I love, Anthony, first of all, I'm glad you brought that up. I forgot to mention that earlier. I think I'm just fascinated more than anything. Like again, just to be unequivocal, like Putin is a dictator. He invaded Ukraine. I think there are some issues with, we talked about this last week, the treaty that we signed with Ukraine in the 90s. But I am intrigued by the overlooking of so much of the stuff that Zelenskyy has done, that, he is, anyway, so to me, I'm more interested in the coverage of it and the definitions, because like I said, I have no qualms about calling Putin some of the most, anything that we need to describe what a horrible person that guy is. He's
I
killed,
agree.
he invades, right. But then it's somehow we can't actually have a discussion about Zelenskyy is ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
That's what I think is fascinating.
Anthony, stand by. Colin, go ahead. Come on and tell folks who don't know where you are what's on your mind.
Hi there. I'm in Western Ukraine, in Lviv. Can you hear me okay?
We hear you
Yeah.
fine, sir.
Great. So a couple points about the banning
Well, first,
of
tell
churches.
us
I
what you're
know many
doing. First, tell us what you're doing in Ukraine, sir.
I've lived here for about 10 years, and my grandparents were from Ukraine. I'm a very, very American culturally, but I've lived here for 10 years, learned the language, and now I'm
Have
just
you
an English.
left it all during the war?
A couple times, and I left during
Yeah.
COVID, and then some other times. But I was here at the start of the war, and then I left
And
after
do you have dual citizenship?
No, I do not. I would not want. I wanted dual citizenship before, but I'm scared of getting mobilized.
Okay.
So I would rather not
Okay.
have
Sorry
that.
to interrupt. Just wanted to give people the background. Go ahead. First, you were going to talk about the religious issue.
Yeah, so I actually know a lot of people that are still a part of the Russian Orthodox Church, and I haven't heard any like personal stories. I mean, I don't know the whole situation, but it's also important to keep in mind that the head of the Moscow Patriarch is a former KGB agent, and so there's a lot of suspicions about within the church, and that it's a big KGB operation that goes throughout the country in the Moscow Patriarchy. And then about the language, I think the language, people say a lot of things about the Russian language. I live in Western Ukraine, a very Ukrainian speaking city, but I hear Russian all the time. And there are negative attitudes towards the Russian language, but the further east you go, you will hear Russian all the time, and you won't hear, maybe you'll hear private conversations about the Russian language, and I guess they do really don't like the Russian language, but you don't really see discrimination against the Russian language, using the Russian language. You hear it all the time, especially in Kiev. You go to Kiev and you hear Russian everywhere. And a lot of Ukrainians are upset that you do hear Russian language there. But that was basically what I wanted to comment on.
But
Okay.
do they?
Sean, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, can you touch on what Anthony was saying? Like, as far as you know, are there any additional restrictions on free speech or the freedom to worship?
No, I've never run into, and I myself am a Christian, and I see no banning of religion. I know people from villages further east that still are part of the Moscow, their churches are part of the Moscow Patriarchy, but they're trying to kind of get away from that. And I saw some stuff that there were some laws about the Moscow Patriarchy, but I'm not sure about the details of that and what that actually includes.
Colin, what is that picture behind you of?
This is, I don't know. It's an apartment that I'm in, and I think it's like a croissant with some creamy
All right.
like
I thought it was
bakery thing.
I thought it was sashimi. Now, are you a stand-up comic?
I am, yeah.
Yeah. Is there a lot of comedy clubs open currently in Western Ukraine? Are
In my
you-
city, there's two stand-up.
And do you perform in English?
I perform in Ukrainian.
Give us like your best current joke.
Can I do PG-13?
Yeah, sure. You can do whatever you want, whatever's funny.
Okay.
Anthony's fine with blue, so go do whatever.
Well, I'm 27. My mom thinks I'm about 10 years old, and when we watch a film and it shows sex, she always says, "Close your eyes." I mean, it's gotten really hard to watch porn with her.
All right.
Everyone needs humor, particularly in wartime.
Are you making your living doing stand-up now in Western Ukraine, or are you doing other stuff?
I'm teaching English, but I do make
Okay.
some. And soon I'll hopefully be making just stand-up.
What are the names of the two comedy clubs that are open?
One is called Dovhy Berkhlevy Opliski, which means like, what does it mean? Like
Chuckles.
loud,
Chuckles.
loud. No, not chuckles, claps.
Claps, loud claps. Okay,
Yes.
and what's the other one called?
The other one is Cult Comedy Hall.
Cult. And my last question for you, and then maybe Dan has one, is, are you and the people you talk to optimistic that there'll be a deal that will make things better for the people of Ukraine?
Yeah, actually, I actually did want to comment on like what's been happening over the last 2 weeks. There's a lot of panic. There's a lot of many people are very upset with. I supported Trump. I support Trump, but what I've seen, and I've supported him completely. Besides his rhetoric towards Zelenskyy, the him calling him a dictator is just ridiculous. And I don't know. I had a question for Sean. Does he really believe that, or is he really just misinformed? Does he believe that is his strategy, or is he misinformed? Why is he saying that? I know you said he's doing it to soften him so he can shove a deal down Ukraine, but why does he believe it?
I can't answer that entirely, but I don't believe so. And the only reason I say it is because they actually knew each other prior to the thing. I think he's also pissed at some of the things that Zelenskyy said. And so this is his way of getting back. I mean, like, Trump lashes, at everybody that attacks him in some ways. He fights back. And I mean, I'm not shocked. And just, he literally at CPAC was running through various names for Joe Biden and getting the audience to react to them. This is how he fights back. And so I think he just figured, I'm going to say something that's the most insulting to you by calling you a dictator.
Colin, am I right that you do work with kids in Ukraine?
I used to. Now just adults. I'm kind of tired of kids.
Okay. Dan, question for Colin, and then Anthony. Dan first, then Anthony. Go ahead, Dan.
I shared. Sometimes I'm frustrated with kids, Colin, as well.
Yeah.
No, I mean, just I don't have anything. It's incredibly fascinating to hear.
All right. Okay, Anthony, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, so just to clarify, so even if I live here in France now, but I was born in the DRC in the middle of Africa, and I grew up around 1994 with the genocide in Rwanda. And I remember this thing, even if I was quite young at the time, the very first thing that happened was that suddenly, so like the president at the time just decided very how can I say that, like casually almost, they started to ban languages, they started to restrict freedom of religion. And when I see countries or leaders do things like that, it just sets me off, because I know what happened in 1994. Yep. And I'm like, that cannot be allowed. It doesn't really matter what's the reason, because the politicians, they always have reasons.
Yes,
and
sir.
Having seen the number of people who cross over into my country, who were really refugees and lived in like abject poverty, and I just don't want to see that happen. That's really
very well said. Very well said. Thank you both for coming on. We hope you'll come back and both stay safe in your respective environments. Colin from potential strikes for more, and Anthony from too much fatty cheese. Thank you both coming on. Appreciate it. All right. You're watching the Morning Meeting International Edition. Let's, for a change, do a little domestic and bring Michelle in. Michelle, welcome back to Two Way. Tell folks who don't know, after you unmute, where you are, what's on your mind, please.
Yeah, I'm in Virginia, and thank you so much for having me again. It's so funny. Every time I've been on a couple of times, and every time you have me on, I'm cool as a cucumber, and then bam, like I get so nervous. So bear with me.
Take a deep breath. You do fine. You got this down.
So I wanted to just sort of comment on. I have a couple of notes here on DOGE. I feel a lot of compassion for the young lady who was on last week. Who told her story about, getting laid off. And it's really hard to hear those stories. But I do think that there is this perspective that, we need to kind of have this, conversation across media. Why are federal employees entitled to this untouchable employment, despite knowing there are a lot of gross inefficiencies in sort of the federal bureaucracy? And why can't the federal government actually right-size their workforce, which is something that every company needs to do? And so I feel like the Democrats are sort of playing this game, trying to draw attention to this. But, there were millions upon millions of Americans during COVID who they experienced layoff after layoff, and the federal bureaucracy was wholly protected during that time. And so that argument doesn't translate to the average American who experience those excuse me, experience those layoffs and experienced, sort of the whole cascade of what happened during COVID. And frankly, what happens in the economy, writ large, companies have to flex up and down with their workforce to meet the demands.
Yep.
Why can't the federal bureaucracy do the same?
So, Michelle, I bet you Sean and Dan are both going to say they agree, but gentlemen, go ahead and state your agreement.
What I find most fascinating, to your point, I agree with you. There was always this sense of I can't be touched. And I think beyond that, I watched a bunch of Democrats this weekend on Sunday shows say, we've all known the federal government was bloated. We've all known. And my answer is, and you did nothing. You sat by and allowed that to happen, which is a gross disrespect of taxpayer money and perpetuating inefficiencies. So to me, I like this kind of is the same approach that I take to President Trump's view of the war. For 4 years, you said nothing. You allowed all these people who suddenly are obsessed with the style, how he's going about it. For so long, we've been given excuses and told that it's got to be accepted almost. The idea that the inefficiencies, the waste, the bloat, et cetera. So to have somebody come in and finally say, you know what, I'm going to take care of it. I think that's where there's a lot of Americans who are on that side that say, I appreciate somebody actually looking into it. And to Dan's point, he made this earlier. I don't disagree. I mean, there's obviously been some fumbles with some of the numbers, but whether you're saving 8 million or 80 million, the idea that somebody's looking for it and focused on it, to me, I'm just excited about it. I'm happy that it's happening. I feel sorry for some of these people, as I truly do, that if you lose your job, any job, whether it's a private sector job or a public job, but at some point, every American owes over $100,000 in debt. Where's the concern for the debt that's getting piled onto people that's going to harm our ability to defend ourselves or to provide key infrastructure projects or whatever going forward in the country? At some point, that should have equal outrage.
Dan, how do you agree with Michelle?
Yeah, Sean made the point earlier, and I've said this to friends who are like, where's the outrage around the country? That for almost 25 years, Washington has been like this, right? Ever since 9/11, when they created the Department of Homeland Security and defense spending surged, then during the Great Recession, DC boomed. I know there were stories when the Tea Party members came in 2010 or 11 when they arrived, that some of them were sickened at like all these restaurants opening, all the cranes everywhere. Why? Because of the healthcare and the setting up the CFPB and the financial reform. It surged with lobbyist money, right? People put their kids to college off of all the money that came into Washington. And then for the last, 10 years, it's continued up. So to your point, there is not a lot of sympathy for right sizing, for having to move your budget up or down, just like every family does and every business does. I think where there is, frustration on the Democratic side is, one, to Sean's point, the numbers a lot of times are being made up. And two, when private sector companies do layoffs, right? I've worked through them. You have meetings. How are we going to communicate? When are we going to do it, right? What is the message about why we're doing this? What are the outcomes that we hope to achieve? And how are we going to be a better company, kind of leaner, meaner going forward? Instead, what you have in this instance is taunting, gloating, and smacking the hell out of everyone you can, because you can, right? I don't know any private company whose CEO would go on X and say that the employees suck, they're useless, they do this, they do that. You would never do that, ever. And there, a lot of people look at the bureaucracy as this evil blob. And again, you can have your own opinion, but to Sean's point, they're people. A lot of them just do their orders. A lot of this spending is not fraudulent. Just note to everyone, it's federally, congressionally appropriated spending. And all the Republicans are silent about all their appropriations now, right? Waste, fraud, and abuse is the train they're all hopping on, but it's not. And to federal employees, they're like, I am told to do my job.
Right? Michelle, did you have another point you wanted to make real quick?
Well, I was listening to the Real Clear Politics podcast from a couple of days ago, and they were talking about this. And they had a lot of conflicting viewpoints, the couple of guys on there. And one of them was really promoting a little bit more of the pragmatic approach you were talking about, Dan, about being a little bit more methodical. And to that point, I agree with that on some level. However, one of them was mentioning how if we're going to scale down the size of government and really kind of rid of the bloat, to do it, through the departments. They were using Kelly Loeffler with the SBA, talking about how if she were to, give 6 months and say, here's my proposal in 6 months' time of cutting the SBA in half, and then proposing it through Congress and getting it passed. That's the problem. It will never happen that way. I mean, when I was hearing that sort of perspective, I was almost laughing to myself. It's an absolute pipe dream, because all of this is because of Congress and because of the bloat, and there would never actually come to a consensus that would be actually meaningful and effective. And that's a different issue. But it is highly disappointing that we can't actually cut. Now, are there more pragmatic, thoughtful, and compassionate ways to go about it? Yes. But at the end of the day, it does need to happen. We are insolvent. We cannot continue on this road. We have a $2 trillion deficit that is, in excess of our defense spending. And no country that's not a sustainable model for any country to move forward. So we have to scale this down. And I think that people who have true consideration of the concern of our financial, setup in this country, we have to start making aggressive measures. And I don't love the way everything is going, but I'm glad that it's happening. I think that's the point. And, Democrats, you make a lot of really good points, Dan, you always do. But at the end of the day, I'm still here. I'm not actually saying, okay, there are ways of doing it. We still need to do it. It has to happen.
Yeah.
So Michelle, can I just ask you one quick question? Because I totally hear everything you say. So debt and deficit is a huge concern of yours. Am I right?
Yes, and I do understand that 70% of that is Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security.
No. That's fine. So do you support what is coming down the pike in reconciliation to add about 4 to 5 trillion in debt?
It is so painful. And to be fair, I think I am probably where the average American is, where this is so complicated. I don't even know that I can speak to it intelligently. There's so much to that. However, like Ron Johnson was on a podcast recently talking about how he was proposing maybe just take the Clinton budget, scale it to inflation, and get it to there, something that is reflective of where we used to be, not continue to add. We have to do something less than where we are now. Yep. And then go from there, just like any household, any family. Stop buying the Starbucks, every day on the way to work. We have to chip away at that because we cannot continue on this path. And so I'm not going to pretend to be some budgetary expert, but so we have to do better than where we are. And, I don't think that anybody is really serious right now in having that conversation.
Michelle, thank you. Please come back regularly. Love having you on. Grateful to you. Liz, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are what's on your mind, please.
Hi, everyone. I am Liz. I'm in Minnesota. And I am nervous. I've been watching.
Don't be. Take a deep breath. You're amongst friends here. If anybody attacks you in the chat, Dan will smote them.
That's right.
So this show has been a godsend. I've been watching it from before the election. I kind of learned about you, Mark, through Smerconish. And now I have a problem because you guys are on at the same time here in Minnesota. And you're winning, I have to say.
All right. Well, you can also go back and listen to Michael later.
I do. I get in the car and then I go back and listen to Michael.
All right, good. Well, welcome in. We're
and I tell everybody about your show.
Thank you for that.
Here's the problem. I'm so frustrated with the lack of decency that seems to be happening in our discourse and just intellectual honesty, which is why I love your show, because I feel like it's one place where I'm really getting that. And I tend to be, I'd say, right of center, but I really want the Democrats to get their act together so we can have more of a checks and balances in this country. And I always wish that Dan would run for, emperor or something, because he seems like he'd be a benevolent dictator.
I like that. Emperor. I have not heard that. I like it.
But I'm a reading tutor. And so my interest right now, my kids are already grown up. They're well educated. They're fine. But I am so concerned about the nation's report card that came out. And I've been thinking it would be great if the Democrats could just latch on to that. I mean, so many people have children. So many people care about the future of our country. If they could latch onto that, stop with the gaslighting and just say, look, this has not worked. We have to change it. We've got to use science. Like there's always the follow the science. Follow the science to teach kids how to read and how to do math. And if they could, I feel like, I mean, I'd be on their team if that could happen. And I tend not to be a hard left person. So, but I don't know who that person would be who could take that mantle. I voted for Dean Phillips. I kind of wish Dean would do that, but
if you were made by the president or by your governor in charge of changing reading practices, what are some changes we should be making?
Well, I think we're already trying to do it in Minnesota, where a structured literacy, phonics-based approach to reading. It's a code. If a student doesn't read naturally, they have to know. They have to be taught explicitly the code. You can't just give them a book and a beanbag and say, you know, enjoy your reading time. So it has to be individuated per kid, which is hard to do in a school setting. But I would love if they could put me out of a job and teach kids the proper way to read, because none of any of this matters if we end up with a population that is illiterate.
Yep. It's the most important issue. Dan.
Yeah, I think you make a great proposal in that, you know, Sean talks a lot about the power of the MAHA movement, and so has Meghan McCain. And this kind of moms that are concerned about the health of their children. I think you could make an argument that it may be that the education of their children is a kind of similar lane, that there is an opening. For Democrats, the issue is we would have to acknowledge, I believe part of the reason that those scores were so bad was what happened during COVID, when schools were shut down. I've said this before, our youngest was learning to read in kindergarten when COVID hit and he was sent home. He spent his entire first grade at home. He entered second grade unable to read. He was a year and a half behind. Now, we are fortunate that we could throw a lot of resources. Over 3 years, he's had tutors and he's finally caught up. But most people cannot afford that. And so in order for the Democratic Party to kind of seize this opening, we would have to admit mistakes that we made, and we would have to confront the teachers union, which we historically have not wanted to do. But to your point, it is, in my opinion, the right thing to do. And there is an opening for us to create, you know, we have to get away from the Make America X again, because it's the Trump brand, but some sort of rallying of parents around new education ideas.
I have a bunch of, I'm sorry, Dan. Oh, Sean.
I will tell you the water's warmer over here. Jump in because I think the Democratic Party is inextricably linked to the teachers union, who don't want to do any of what you just described. I think that if you want to come over to the right, we would probably embrace the idea, look, because we're not bound by any union, never mind the teachers union. And that's a shame, because I still don't understand. I mean, at the end of the day, if the goal is to teach children and to give them the thing, why empowering teachers to not have to do the right thing for children shouldn't be a partisan issue. And it's unfortunate, but you would have a much more receptive audience on this side of the aisle than the other one.
Liz, you're going to get rid of the Department of Education, so stick to the Democratic side.
Yeah, Liz, thank you. Thank you for joining. Really appreciate it. Please come back regularly. Love to have you on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You did
All
great.
right. Tonight, 5 p.m. Eastern time, please join us. Talking slowly because you're about to see a dramatic promo graphic. Please join us for the second episode. I say the second episode, waiting for the graphic to come up, of Meghan McCain's Happy Hour. Meghan's guest tonight, waiting for the graphic. Meghan's guest tonight, two incredible guests. If you don't know these folks, you're going to get a chance to meet them tonight. Ben Ferguson and Christine Rosen. So again, 5 p.m. tonight, there you see them, Ben Ferguson, Christine Rosen, and the eponymous Meghan McCain of Meghan McCain's Happy Hour. That's at 5 o'clock tonight. And then at 6 o'clock, if you're not watching Sean's show, you can watch me on Two-Way tonight. And then tomorrow night,
Huckabee tonight, by the way.
Mike Huckabee, Ambassador Huckabee, breaking the record for the most interviews done by someone nominated for a Senate confirmed position before they're confirmed. No, he's already broken the record. He's adding on it. He's all the time.
I know.
Onto it.
It says a lot about his prowess that he does.
No one's noticed but me that he's in complete violation of the norm that you don't do interviews until you're confirmed, but he keeps doing them.
Yeah, but how many
Anyway,
hosts of morning shows can just be like, yeah, and I talked to Donald Trump yesterday. He called me, other than our friends on 6th Avenue. Sean,
yeah,
I
Sean
think, you know,
Spicer.
that's
Yeah.
not insignificant.
Yeah, I tend to, unlike Sean, who is comfortable revealing when President Trump calls him, but not the content. I keep the whole thing private. And then tomorrow night on Two-Way Tonight, I'm teasing it now because it's going to be a blockbuster episode. Congressman Richie Torres, who today endorsed Andrew Cuomo for mayor of New York, will be our guest. So lots coming up here on Two-Way and more announcements coming soon. I keep telling you, the platform's expanding. You're going to see more fruits of that labor in the coming days, weeks, and months ahead. Sean, Dan, very grateful to you for being part of the Two-Way team here on the morning meeting. I'll see you at 6 o'clock tonight. Megan at 5. Good luck and good day.